joining me at the Jaipur Literature Festival, a remarkable writer and woman of many parts, Namita Gokhale, novelist, short story writer, explorer of legends and myths, and also, remarkably, since its inception, a major co-director of the festival itself. Namita, it's a joy for me to be here on the 6th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, and it is just growing bigger, greater, grander, a worldwide phenomenon. What do you ascribe the galloping growth and excitement of this festival as an almost world literary event?
I'd say it's to do with the moment. It's to do at a moment when India is changing. It's finding itself. It's finding a new India. It's the youngest country in the world in terms of our population. And there's an interest in India all around, not least from the Indians themselves, because there's a new generation of Indian readers who really don't know that much about themselves. And they come back to this festival to find themselves, to find their own voices, to find their own languages, and also to find the rest of the world. I mean, I'd say every year in January, Jaipur visits the world, and the world visits Jaipur.
The world visits Jaipur, and what's so exciting about the growth of the JLF, of course, is that, as I said, in a globalized world, it is truly international. There are writers from literally every corner of the world, from Nobel laureates to literary stars to thriller writers. Why is Jaipur and your festival such a magnet of attraction?
See, I'm very proud that it's so global and so international, but even more proud that it's local and rooted. And I think that is its real strength, which is recognized by people around the world.
Right. And one of your great passions and crusades at literary festivals, not just in Jaipur, but wherever you go, has been to promote Indian languages, what you call bhasha cultures, and the great literary traditions of India. What is the response you've had in promoting India's great repository and richness of languages?
But I'm just one of the people who are doing this. I'm just happen to be happily positioned in the sense that as an English writer, I'm still in a position to read and appreciate Hindi and other languages a little bit. So there are many others like me. And I think the core of it is the fact that India is basically a country of bilingual and often trilingual people. All of us
and festivals like this must be a bridge.
Yes.
Between cultures and Indian language.
Our sessions themselves are bilingual and trilingual, and that just draws in a different sort of energies, because they say that you live as many lives as the languages you speak.
Let's go back to your fascinating career as a writer. You were 28, a young woman in her prime, when you published your first novel, Borrowed Dreams of Passion, in 1984. It became an instant sensation for its sensuality, its explicitness, its raw, passionate energy. It was considered a shocker. How did you achieve that in your late 20s? I mean, to have an instant debut bestseller.
Well, I was a modest young woman who wrote an immodest book, and it was called The First of the Sari Rippers. And I doubt if it would shock people, but it does still raise a few eyebrows.
And has never gone out of print?
And has never gone out of print. And I'm always delighted when a young reader comes up to me and looks at this sort of, almost discreet-looking auntie and says, I loved your book and I found it very funny. So it's been very gratifying.
Right. Between these fictional bookends, as it were, a fictional beginning and your return to fiction, you've covered a great deal of ground. One of the richnesses in your writing has been to explore legends and myths, particularly through the image and retelling of the story of Sita, of Shakuntala, but also equally retelling the Mahabharata for children and exploring aspects of Shiva. What takes you into these larger-than-life mythical gods and goddesses?
Well, Sunil, as you know, I'm a Pahari woman. I still think of myself as a Pahari girl from Nainital. And so Shiva was very much the god of the mountains. So when Gwen asked me to do a book on Shiva, I treated it like exercise in devotion almost. I started studying it, and I came up with a short book where I learned a lot. And that, a lot of what I learned in Shiva actually came out in Shakuntala. So it's funny how you research, it often happens with me that I research a particular book and it comes out in fiction somewhere else. And then I was asked to do the Mahabharata for young readers. And I think that was perhaps the most challenging moment of my life, because being a rash old woman, I said yes. And when I then encountered the Mahabharata in all its strength, length, magnificence, and I, in 6 months, did this 40,000 version, 40,000 words.
To condense it.
To condense it was
a major exercise.
I was out of breath. And I was out of breath because I recognized what a huge work of genius the Mahabharata is. Whatever there is in life is in the Mahabharata. What is not there in the Mahabharata is not there in life, they say. And for 2 years I couldn't write. Because I said, why write? Everything is already in. It just left me a little...
a work of such elaboration, which also then had to be tightened to make it accessible and friendly for a younger audience.
Yes.
But let me get back to your reference of being just a Pahari girl, the mountains. You're a Kamauni from a great literary tradition with a mother who I happen to know has 30,000 verses of Hindi and Urdu poetry in her head, the great Mirza Pant. You yourself are the mother of a leading publishing editor. Do you think this incredible gene pool of 3 strong literary generations springs from the mountains of Kumaon? Because so much of your material is also centered in Kumaon.
Well, I'd like to think so. My great-grandfather wrote the history of Kumaon, and I had all these cousins tumbling out of... I mean, we did in fact have a literature festival in Doon, in Dehradun some years ago. And then we realized that about 60% of it were cousins, Pahari cousins. I'm very proud to be related to Mrinal Pandey, to Ira Pandey, and to, of course, the great Shivani and so many others. And their stories have fed my stories, especially Shivani's literature. And in Hindi, which has seeped into most Paharis. And just now I had the strangest encounter with Kumaon all over again, which was that I discovered a Russian set of folk tales written by Ivan Minayev in 1870, which had never been translated. And I'm going back, and a friend is translating them for me. And I'm rediscovering the Kumaon of those days, which is giving me research material for a novel I'm writing now. So it's all, you know, I love the mountains. As you know, I work on the Bhutan Literature Festival. I work on the Kathmandu Literature Festival because the Himalayas just mean something to me.
There is a particular call of the mountains, as it were. But when you were speaking so passionately about mountain law and your love of the mountains and your family, very literary and high-minded, which comes from the mountains, you also connected it beautifully as to how one project or story leads to another. Has that been a recurring leitmotif in your life?
It always has, because I'm not much of a researcher. And I find that there's this wonderful synchronicity that comes about. That if I'm really looking for something, it sort of lands on my lap, as it were, as though I was intended always to read that particular play, essay, book, or encounter that heard story. It could even be in an airport overheard by somebody else. And I mean, I think that's how life works, that it's a series of blessed and encounters that have a sense of grace about it if you just learn to go with the flow. And that's where I think it's about the wisdom of the mountains and the wisdom of the sea, which I've always compared, if I'm not sounding a bit too flowery. But I love the sea, and the wisdom of the sea that I learned was that it retreats and it returns, it retreats and it returns. And the wisdom of the mountains is that it just sits there stubbornly. So I think in life we need to do both these things, even in our writing.
Yes.
Most writers go back.
Life is an ocean of stories, and of course, literary achievement is really the pinnacle and summit of this great backdrop of mountains that you come from. Namita Gokhale, it's absolutely great pleasure to talk to you, and all the very best for the 6th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival. Your very bonny baby, which has now grown into a mature and very influential international adult. Thank you.
Thank you.